There is a Rolex in this video that costs $8,000 and a Rolex that costs over $80,000. Both of them are sitting in dealer safes right now, unsold, for months. And that is the strange thing about Rolex in 2026. The brand has a waitlist problem and an inventory problem at the same time, in the same building, on the same afternoon. Ask for a steel Daytona, and there is a queue. Ask for anything on this list, and a dealer will call you back within days. Some of these failed because of price. Some because of a trend that turned. One of them failed because Rolex built something nobody asked for. Let us count down 8 Rolexes currently rotting at dealerships, starting with the cheapest. Number 8, the Air King. Around $8,000. We start with the most sympathetic case on the list. The Air King carries the oldest continuously produced name in the entire Rolex catalog, with genuine aviation history behind it, and it sits at one of the most reasonable prices Rolex charges. On paper, this is the smart entry point, a steel Rolex with real heritage, without the Submariner Q and without the Submariner Premium. Unfortunately, the design choices left it stranded. The dial mixes green, yellow, and a 5-minute scale that reads more like an aircraft instrument than a watch. It is genuinely distinctive, and distinctive is exactly the problem. A buyer at this level wants the Rolex that goes with everything. This is the Rolex that goes with one particular taste. Walk in with this budget and ask a dealer what they recommend. They will point you at an Oyster Perpetual or an Explorer, because both are cleaner, both read more clearly as a Rolex from across a room, and both are far easier to sell later. Nobody dislikes the Air King. That is the whole issue. Nobody feels much about it at all, and a watch that produces no feeling produces no sale. It sits in the case, fairly priced, being politely ignored. Number 7, the awkward steel date, just around $10,000. The Datejust is the best-selling watch Rolex has ever made, and most versions of it move perfectly well. So this entry is not about the model. It is about a specific decision Rolex made. Rolex offers the Datejust 41 in an almost absurd number of configurations. Different bezels, dials, bracelets, metals, markers, hundreds of ways to build essentially the same watch. However, only a handful of those combinations actually sell. Fluted bezel, Jubilee bracelet, a classic dial in silver, black or blue. That is the Datejust people buy, and it has been the Datejust people buy for decades. Everything else waits. An Oyster bracelet on a dress watch, a domed bezel that removes the design element the watch is known for, a dial in a color that was fashionable in one specific year and now reads as a timestamp on your bad decision. Each of those configurations was built for one buyer whose exact preference it matches, and most of those buyers never walk in. So it sits in the safe, waiting for the one person on Earth who wants that combination, which is a long wait, at $10,000 a unit. Infinite choice does not create infinite opportunity. It creates infinite inventory. Number 6, the Rolex 1908. Around $14,000. This one was built to answer a real criticism, which makes its failure genuinely interesting. For decades, enthusiasts told Rolex the same thing. You have no proper dress watch. Everything is a sports watch or a president. So Rolex built a slim, classical, deliberately quiet piece, and even gave it a display case back, which Rolex almost never does. It answered the complaint precisely. However, the person making that complaint was never going to buy it. Someone who wants a slim classical dress watch has an enormous field to choose from, and much of that field has specialized in exactly this for over a century. At $14,000, that buyer is looking at brands whose entire identity is this kind of watch. And the person who walks into a Rolex dealer is not there for restraint. They are there for a Rolex, the specific, instantly recognizable object that everybody identifies on sight. The 1908 is the least recognizable watch Rolex makes, so it satisfies a criticism nobody was going to pay to resolve, and it disappoints the buyer who came in wanting a Rolex to look like one. Dealers have them. Dealers keep having them. Number 5, the Lady Datejust with a diamond bezel. Around $20,000. For a long stretch, this was one of the most reliable sellers in the entire catalog. A gold Rolex with a diamond bezel was the anniversary watch, the milestone watch, the gift that said something without needing to be explained. It moved consistently for decades. Sadly, the ground underneath it shifted, and it shifted fast. The entire signaling logic of luxury inverted in about 3 years. When the wealthiest people in the room are wearing plain clothes and quiet watches, covering an expensive watch in expensive stones stopped reading as success. It reads as effort, and effort is the one thing a status object cannot afford to broadcast. There is a hard economic layer under the cultural one, and it is the cleanest logic in this video. Buyers who want diamonds buy jewelry. Buyers who want watches buy watches. Setting stones into a watch creates something that satisfies neither impulse completely, while costing dramatically more than either one alone. If you want stones, a jeweler gives you far more stone for the money. If you want a watch, the stones added cost to something whose value was never about stones. Ask a dealer about this configuration and watch what happens. There will be no talk of a list. They will ask how many variations you would like to see. Number 4. The white gold date. Just with a smooth bezel. Around $40,000 here is a watch that costs a fortune, specifically in order to look inexpensive. White gold is one of the most expensive materials Rolex uses. The case has real weight to it in the hand. It is, objectively, a serious luxury object. And to anyone standing more than a couple of feet from your wrist, it looks exactly like the steel Datejust that costs a quarter as much. However, the metal is only half the problem. Add a smooth bezel, and the watch loses the single most recognizable design element Rolex has. The fluted bezel is the reason a Datejust reads as a Datejust across a room. It catches light, it breaks up the case, and it is doing an enormous amount of work. Remove it. Replace it with a plain polished ring, and what remains is a $40,000 watch with nothing to say for itself. So you are paying an enormous premium for a material that is invisible, on a design that removed the thing that made it identifiable. Nobody can tell what it cost. Nobody can tell what it is. That is the definition of a watch that sits. Number 3. The day date. 40 in yellow gold, 50,400. The President. The single most symbolically important watch Rolex makes, and one of the hardest in the catalog to move. Look at what happened to the price. A few years ago, this watch sat in the 30s. Today, it is $50,400, and it got there through 2 separate increases in 2026 alone. Gold as a commodity did rise, but the retail price climbed faster than the metal underneath it, and the gap between those 2 lines is simply Rolex charging more because they believed they could. However, look at what that decision actually did. In the 30s, the day date competed with other Rolexes. At $50,000, it stopped competing with Rolex and started competing with everything else at that price, and that comparison is not kind. Grand Seiko will sell you gold with finishing that is demonstrably more refined for a fraction of it. Jaeger-LeCoultre will sell you complications Rolex does not attempt. Cartier will sell you better design. The day date walks into that room as the most expensive option with the least interesting movement, and the secondary market confirms it in the most damaging way possible. Used gold day dates trade below retail, which means the watch Rolex markets as the ultimate store of value is one of the faster ways to lose money in the catalog. Nobody wants to admit losing several $1,000s on a watch they bought last month, so they do not buy, and the flagship sits. Number 2. The Gold Sky Dweller on Oysterflex. $61,400. Give Rolex full credit here, because this is the most technically ambitious thing they build. An annual calendar that knows which months have 30 days. A second time zone. The month displayed through markers around the bezel. They spent years developing it. And in gold on a rubber strap, at over $61,000, it was built for a person who does not exist. The buyer who wants a Rolex, wants a Submariner, a Daytona, a GMT, watches you understand in 1 second. This has 2 time displays and a bezel that indicates months, and to that buyer, it simply looks like too much happening at once. The buyer who wants complications is not shopping at Rolex at all. That buyer wants finishing they can see through a caseback. And at $60,000, they are looking at Jaeger-LeCoultre, at Grand Seiko, at Patek, and finding considerably more watch for the money. Then there is the strap. If this is a sports watch, why is it gold at $61,000? If it is a gold watch, why is it on rubber? And here is the detail that gives the whole thing away. In the January 2026 price increase, gold models across the Rolex catalog went up several percent. The gold Sky Dweller went up about 1%, while the entire category around it moved many times that. Rolex will never announce that a model has failed, but a company that raises everything else and leaves one reference almost untouched is telling you precisely what it knows about that reference's demand. Number 1. The Diamond Set Gold Day Date. Over $80,000, and here it is, $80,000 and up depending on how far the stones go. Some configurations pass 90. This is the President with a factory diamond bezel, and it is the hardest thing in the entire Rolex catalog to move. Two separate failures stack on top of each other here, and either one alone would be enough. The first is everything we just covered at number 3. The gold price outran the market, and at this level, the watch is competing with Patek, with Vacheron, with Audemars Piguet, and losing that comparison on movement and finishing. The second is the diamonds, and here the two failures multiply instead of adding. Because a diamond set dress watch has one buyer profile, and that profile just got smaller for cultural reasons. And the same buyer is now looking at a price that has climbed past what the object can justify. Shrinking demand meeting rising price is the worst possible intersection in retail. And there is something almost poetic about where it ends up. This is the watch Rolex builds to be the ultimate expression of the brand. Maximum gold, maximum stones, maximum statement. It is the top of the catalog. And it has no wait list, no relationship required, no allocation conversation. Just over $80,000 of Rolex, available immediately, waiting for somebody.